Thanks for visiting In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics and our very special guest, Darrin Simmons. We have a two-parter with Darrin Simmons. He is the Bengals assistant head coach as well as special teams coordinator. And there's nobody in the league that does his job better than Darrin Simmons. And the Bengals have been fortunate to have him as part of the organization for 20 years. And he has coached and developed many star special teams players. He's going to talk about a lot of them. And he's hesitant to do that because he feels like he's always going to leave somebody out. But boy, the special teams roll call, the Cincinnati Bengals, is extraordinary. And it was a big reason for the success of the football team last year, dictating field position, and the unit of Clark Harris, Kevin Huber, and Evan McPherson was as good as the National Football League had to offer. Our 1 million YouTube view giveaways contest, courtesy First Star Logistics, continues with a special contest that runs until August 7th, 9 o'clock. So you have plenty of time, but don't procrastinate. Don't wait, because prizes include 2 tickets to a Cincinnati Reds game in the Boone County Bourbon Room with Dave Lapham. That would be me. 2 tickets to Cincinnati Reds game in the Boone County Bourbon Club with a celebrity to be determined later. And I know you're going to like that. It's big time. A signed Dave Lapham jersey, First Star Logistics custom backpack filled with apparel and gear, a $300 value, very nice prize, 2 $50 gas cards. Want the price of gas today? Nice. To enter, just go to the link and description below or scan the QR code. Welcome once again to In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics, as always, in our outstanding studios. And we are joined once again, a real friend of the podcast, assistant head coach, special teams coordinator, Darrin Simmons. Coach, how you be? How was your 4th of July?
Oh, it was great. Spent it on the road traveling, about 16 hours in a car. It was wonderful. Traveling back from Kansas. But no, it's good to be back home. It's good to be back here getting ourselves ready to go.
I know you say coming back from Kansas, and I know over the years we've talked about it many times that you go back, your family has been in the farming industry for, many years, your whole life, basically. You go back there and, man, during harvest time, you're working hard, aren't you, when the Bengals are on their break between mini camps and training camp?
Yeah, usually I leave the day after OTAs is over with, which is usually on a Thursday. I get home on Friday, and usually I'm on the combine by, sometime Friday afternoon, helping with wheat harvest. We come from a big farming community out there in Southwest Kansas. Really, my family's farm was really in Oklahoma, but where I'm from, it's right on the border of Kansas and Oklahoma. My parents live in Kansas, but they've farmed in Oklahoma. I still got my in-laws farm a little further north of there, up in Dodge City, Kansas. But yeah, farming is very very rich in my background, and it's a big part of I think kind of what's helped me establish work ethic and throughout my entire life. So it's a big foundation for where I'm from.
Yeah, I mean that's some hard work there. I mean, how many hours are you on that combine during in a typical day? What's that like for you out there?
Well, it's usually 11 or 12 hours.
Really?
Yeah. Usually you can out there's without getting too technical, a lot has to do with the moisture and what type of humidity there is in the morning and how the humidity comes up out of the ground at nighttime and makes things kind of moist. You walk out in your yard sometimes early in the morning and the grass is wet.
Yep.
It's kind of the same thing with wheat. Wheat, you need dry conditions. You need to be as dry as you possibly can. So as the sun comes up and burns that moisture off that comes up out of the ground, that gets your grass wet, it gets the wheat wet too. You have to wait for that to burn off a little bit. So most of the time you get started somewhere around 9 a.m. By the time you service the combines up, refuel them. You have to refuel them every day. Usually they hold about 80 or 90 gallons of diesel.
Wow.
And you burn one of those tanks in a day, and then you have to grease everything up, fuel it up, and then usually get started around 9. And then a lot of times we get shut down somewhere around 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. And but you never get off that thing. It's going nonstop. We take our lunch with us, and we get up in that cab. And usually, after you get in that cab at 9 a.m., you don't get out until you're leaving at 10. So those are full days for sure.
No,
Lot like training camp days or football days.
there you go. There you go. You mentioned Dodge City, 1992
Mhm.
at Dodge City. You led the nation in punting and All-American at Dodge City. What was that year like for you?
Well, it was a good year. We had a solid year. We actually went to a bowl game with the RC Cola Bowl up in Iowa.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember who we played now. It was another school from Iowa. At the time in 1992, when we went, this team that we played had the biggest offensive line in any form of football. It was like in Sports Illustrated. I think it was like Iowa. It was some school from Iowa, but I think they averaged like 330 or 340 across the front. It was in Sports Illustrated. Like I said, I can't remember the name of it, but we had a good year. I started at quarterback the whole year, and I was a starting punter. So it's kind of like the Cowboys used to be with Danny White. Danny White was the quarterback on first, second, third down, and he dropped back and punt sometimes on fourth down. So fortunately for me, I was a better punter than I was a quarterback. I was really good at handing the ball off. I was a hell of a lot better at handing the ball off than I was at throwing it probably. But that was a fun year. We had a good time. It was a successful year.
Yeah, so those Iowa linemen were corn-fed, man. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. Then you go to Kansas, and you guys. I remember your senior year. I was doing Big 8 games, and you guys, Kansas was in the top 10 during the course of that year, and you were all conference as a punter, and you were academic All-American. You had a good run at Kansas, didn't you?
Yeah, my senior year, we had a really good year. As you know, when you're part of successful teams, those are really special years. Kansas has not been known for its football program, as we know, but we were a part of building it up. That year, we were 10-2.
Yep.
We beat UCLA in the Aloha Bowl. We had a pretty good run. We finished in the top 10 in the country. It was a good year. I was fortunate enough to have a good year that year too, and it was a special year for Kansas football because it's after being down not one of the more successful programs in the country, it felt really good to help elevate that and have that program have some success for a little bit of time there.
So do you think that Kevin Huber and Drew Crispin know, that you were as good as you were in terms of actually taking action upon what you speak of? You're not only talk the talk, you were walking the walk, my man, big time.
Well, I don't know about that. I certainly can't do the things that those guys can do. That's why they're in the position they're in. That's why I'm coaching. But no, those are fun times. And obviously we've got two very talented punters in camp with us now, or will be in camp with us here in a month. But I think it is unique a little bit. I'm probably one of the few special teams coaches in the league that actually played one of the positions.
Yep.
The specialist positions. I was a punter, of course, and so I have pretty good knowledge. Maybe sometimes it's probably more than what I should express to those guys and let them do what they need to do. But I think I can help them, especially in terms of technique, because I've played it, I've experienced it, and I know what they're going through. So sometimes I can help, but I try to keep my distance also too, and let them do what they do. They're talented enough to get themselves to this spot. So I certainly don't want to mess them up.
I know a lot of services that provide statistics and analytics and all that on special teams. Your teams are always amongst the best in the National Football League, if not leading the National Football League, top 5, top 10. And last year's team, I believe, in one of these deals that I was looking at was 8th, I believe, in the National Football League. How do you feel last season went in terms of special teams? Do you feel like you outperformed expectations, or do you have preseason, goals that you'd like to meet, or how do you handle all that?
Well, I thought we were solid, for the most part. We need to be more dynamic in the return game, especially on punt return, than what we've been. I think that starts back deep. We've got to find somebody that can be a dynamic player for us back there. Obviously, still though, the most important part is being able to assume possession of the ball once it's punted to us, and it didn't always work out that way. It kind of cost us. It was a big part of costing us the San Francisco game. We couldn't handle. We turned the ball over a couple of times. So certainly the biggest thing we want to do is just get the ball to our offense. But for us to rank where we're used to ranking, we got to make some dynamic plays. Obviously, on kickoff return too, it hurt us. Certainly losing Brandon Wilson early in the season, that was a big blow to us, not only in terms of coverage, but his ability as a kickoff returner.
Yeah.
But I thought otherwise we played solidly in coverage, both on punt and kickoff. I thought we covered well. We had a pretty good turnover in players. We had acquired some guys that really stepped up. Trey Flowers being one, Clay Johnston being one. Us losing Akeem Davis-Gaither, midway through the season, and Jordan Evans. Those are two pretty big losses. Those are two key contributors for us, and we had some guys, some younger players that stepped up and again, some new players like the ones I mentioned before that stepped up and really helped us solidify. So I feel like we have more experience in terms of those core positions, going into this season than we did a year ago. And we'll have some guys coming back off injury. Marcus Bailey had some surgery in the offseason. Joe Bocci had some stuff done, obviously tore his ACL. And so he'll be coming back off injury. And if we can get those guys back and healthy and get rolling and find ourselves a dynamic playmaker, returner, or, one that can handle the ball cleanly and then make some plays, then we have a chance to be pretty good, I think, again.
How about Evan McPherson? He hit 9 field goals of 50 yards or more, and some very, very critical, obviously. I mean, you knew this kid was a special talent. Did he even not surprise you, but did he exceed what you thought he might be?
Yeah. I mean, it would be stupid for me to say that he didn't. I really had a lot of faith in his ability after watching him kick that day down in Florida. I think I've said before that we're fortunate probably a year ago that there was no combine. He would have been invited. He certainly would have been in the combine. He was an early out junior. He, applied for the draft early and came out early. And fortunately for us, there was no combine, because if there was, everybody else would have saw the same thing that I saw that day down in Florida, and he would have been very coveted. And so there was about six or seven coaches that were down there watching him that day. I didn't talk a whole lot about it to anybody, but I was thoroughly impressed. I mean, I saw it, and I hadn't seen, not to take anything away from some of the kickers we've had here in the past, but I saw something that day that I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw power. And probably the most important part for a young guy was I saw a high level of competitiveness and maturity. It's probably hard for some of the listeners to understand what being competitive and being a kicker is like, but Evan certainly is. He, anytime I challenged him with something, I could see him, his spirits get lifted up a little bit, and you can see the competitive juices started to flow that day. And he responded every single time. Every single challenge that I brought up to him, he responded to it and came through. And I left there. No, man, it would be a hell of a deal if we can get this guy on our team somehow, some way. If we can get this guy on our side, and he had a really good year. Started early in the year in the Minnesota game. Hitting a game winner there. Yep. And probably the most important game, it was really a game that was probably the low point of his career so far. The low point of that season was the Green Bay game. He had a couple misses in that game, and one was a 58-yarder off the right hash at the end of regulation that he absolutely destroyed it. It hit the upright though.
Yep.
And and then much to everybody's surprise, he has another chance in overtime on the 49-yarder at the other end of the field, and I think he thought it was in. I think Kevin thought it was in, and it went right over the top of the upright. But it's something that we learned that day that I've never really been a part of. We had a pretty good right to left wind, and Evan hits the ball so high and so far and so high that I think the wind affected it more than what I'd ever seen anything happen. In our stadium down there at the riverside, that's the lower side, and the wind tends to affect the ball a little more, more down there. And when you're hitting it up in the stratosphere like he is, it just affected it more. So, but most importantly, I think was that was obviously a huge game. It's Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers. They've had all the success that they've had, and we end up losing that game in tough fashion. But the way that he responded let me know that he's going to be fine. He was great on the sidelines, even after the misses, even after the game. He was great. He felt bad, but it didn't affect him to the point where it was going to affect the rest of his season. And I think that's what makes him unique. He's the strongest. Again, not to take anything away from the guys we've had here in the past, but he is certainly the strongest guy mentally I've ever been around that plays that spot. He has a great deal of confidence in himself and his abilities, and when something bad happens or a miss happens, then I have no doubt in my mind he's going to bounce back and hit the next one. So that's what sets him apart in my mind.
Yeah, that 49-yarder against Green Bay, I've never seen a ball move right to left
Yeah.
in a shorter
Yeah.
distance to the upright and
Yeah.
goalpost than it did there. I mean, it was like almost from the goal line to the back of the end zone. It moved like 5 yards. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Yeah.
believe it. It was
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, it wasn't like he was hooking it. Literally, the wind it blew it out of there. It was
Yeah.
absolutely nuts. So in the playoffs, I mean, he gets on a run in the playoffs. Did you
Mhm.
feel like this kid? He's gold. He's automatic. Does your level of confidence in him because he's so confident in himself? Are you like, let's go? And what do you think his ultimate range is on a good day? What weather conditions affect everything, but decent weather conditions on a good day, he's good from what distance do you think, Coach?
Well, we'll attempt some long ones in practice sometimes. I don't do it a lot because it's not very often that you actually are back there doing those things or you're
Right.
back there kicking them. But I will say we actually ended OTAs, the Thursday practice at OTAs. He hit from 63
60.
and from 63 and he didn't, I think he had a couple yards to spare. And he first thing he tells me is I didn't even hit that ball that good. And so, I think he can be on a good day. He can hit from the mid to upper 60s. I think has a, he'd have to hit it good. He'd have to hit it clean. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I do think that he has that kind of range. And I heard on another little podcast one time, it was Pat McAfee, the Pat McAfee show, and he was talking to Evan, and Pat said something that's unique to me that I never really thought about is, his ball gets from point A to point B so fast because he has such power on it that things don't affect it as much.
Huh.
Like, things like the wind, albeit the Green Bay game was a little different,
Right.
but he has such power and he hits the ball so cleanly that the ball gets from point A to point B really fast. So things don't affect it as much, and obviously the playoff run was really good. He got hot, and we needed him to be hot. There's all those games are tightly contested games, and I think he ties the NFL record for total field goals in a playoff run there.
Yeah.
And if you don't make all those kicks, then we may not have been in the position that we're in.
Right.
And so it was very good. You hold your breath on some of those kicks, but I really don't at the end because I just feel super confident he's going to make every one of them, especially the one, the Kansas City game. That's to go to the Super Bowl. It's obviously a huge play, a huge kick. I never even once blinked that that ball, no doubt in my mind, was going through. And so, yeah, again, he's a huge asset for us. He's a huge weapon for us. Really, anytime we get across midfield, I'm talking to Zach about, okay, here's his distance. And I mean, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's give this guy a chance. And he's come through. And he's going to need to continue to come through for us.
I mean, your life as a special teams coach is all about field position and dictating field position and trying to help, the offense and the defense with their field position responsibilities or whatever. And to have that kind of weapon where it's like, okay, we're good now. That's probably 10-yard, at least a 5-yard, sometimes 10-yard differential, what other teams are thinking about. I mean, that's massive, isn't it? It's huge.
Yeah, well, it is. And now I understand what Baltimore's lived with the last, 7 or 8, 9 years with Tucker, with Justin Tucker. They feel the same way. I remember Marvin with Coach Lewis that really a big portion of when we would go for it on fourth down, what calls we'd have to make defensively was so much of it was predicated on, knowing they had Justin Tucker, that if they got across midfield, that they might be in range and they might, try to score points.
Yep.
And, it's good to now know how other teams have to prepare against us. It feels the same way. So, yeah, it's certainly a factor in each and every game.
So let's talk about your punting competition. You have a guy that you've been with, and by the way, congratulations on 2 decades, Coach, with the Cincinnati Bengals. That's phenomenal. A 20-year run in counting here. And Kevin Huber has been there for a good number of them with you. And now you have a competition going with Drew Crispin. What do you anticipate that competition to be like?
Well, I expect it to be highly contested. Kevin is certainly somebody that has been with us for a long time. He's had he's a big part of these runs that we made too down the playoff stretch too. I don't think he punted as well down the stretch, and I think he'd be the first to tell you that. And this is probably why we're even having this conversation. That there are some signs that towards the end of the year that he's got to punt better, and it's not just about the holding part. I mean, that's a big factor in this whole thing. But at the same time, we've got to be able to exchange field position, and but he's certainly somebody that I expect to be in full competition mode once we get to training camp. I handled this past offseason probably a little differently than any offseason I've ever had with him. He punted less. Sometimes less is better, especially with him. I trust him wholly and completely that he'll be ready to go and he'll put his best foot forward when training camp comes. Him and Drew will split time. They'll split reps. And Kevin's got to prove to me that he's the better punter, just like Drew's got to prove to me that he's the better punter.
Yep.
And we'll let the chips fall where they may. Obviously there's a lot of things that factor into it. Kevin's experience with me certainly plays into that. Mm-hmm. And so for Drew to be the guy, he's gonna have to beat him out.
Right.
And that's the way I think that anybody would want it. But this will be the first time really that Kevin's had competition, real competition in training camp. And I expect him, competition brings the best in everybody, and I expect him to be ready to go and punt his butt off, and we'll let the chips fall from there.
He is an outstanding holder. I mean, he has got some super hands on him. How good is Drew Crispin in that area?
I think it's something that he's improved on. If you remember Drew a year ago, he was injured coming into training camp. He broke a bone in his hand, and so he really didn't get a fair shot really to do anything. And really that's his own fault that he was in that position. And so I think that part, especially the holding part, lagged a little bit behind a year ago. It's something that I've told Evan, though, that he's going to have confidence in Drew. He's going to have the same confidence in Drew that he does in Kevin. He's extremely confident in everything that Kevin can do. Right. And I told Evan that he's going to have to feel the same way about Drew. He can't go into each kick, wondering if the ball's going to be in exactly the right spot. He's just got to swing away and trust that Drew's going to get the ball there. And like I said, I think Drew made great improvement in that area from a year ago until where he is now once we left for OTAs. And I expect him to make another big jump over the summer here. And, and again, we have to score points. So the holding part is a big part of it. I used to think that in terms of a punter's job, 60% of it was punting and 40% was holding. And right. That may be flipped like 45-55, maybe 45% of the job is punting and maybe 55% is holding.
Wow.
With the way we use analytics now, we don't punt as much. We go for it a lot more in fourth and short situations. So it's not that the punting part didn't have a major effect, but it I think with the weapon we have at kicker and with the way we use analytics now, that certainly the holding part is a very, very critical part too.
So you mentioned that you thought Kevin kind of struggled down the stretch. What was it? Location? Was it hang time? Was it a little bit of everything? And how about Drew in terms of the different types of punts that have to be executed? How is he in that regard?
Yeah, I think that Kevin, he was just inconsistent down the stretch.
Right.
Whether it was location, whether it was a little bit of a combination of both. It was location, it was hang time. I think the things that he has, the issues that happened there are all fixable. They're all correctable. He just got to be able to go out and do it.
Right.
And I think Drew's obviously he's a much younger guy. He has a very, very, very powerful leg. But it can't be a 50-50 proposition. It can't hit one ball that's crushed and then have the next ball be a poor hit.
Right.
He's got to eliminate the kicks that kill you, and in terms of field position, because you never know when they're going to show up. It can't show up when we're backed up punting out of our own end zone.
At First Star Logistics, we're a very strict company that really puts the pressure on our employees. Breaks? What are those?
That's what I'm talking about, Icky. Get the body right, then the mind's right.
Gotta get that body right.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Become a star with a chance to earn the highest commission percentages in the industry as a freight broker agent. Check out FirstStarLogistics.com.